this report does not surprise. But, Mr Speaker, this motion does provide an opportunity for me to set the record straight and to restate Labor's priorities for a China-Australia free trade agreement. Labor wants the best possible free trade agreement with China, a high-quality agreement that creates and protects Australian jobs, a deal that generates high-skill, fair-paying jobs here in Australia and ensures that Australians are given the first opportunity to do the work in Australia. Firstly, in support of this, Labor believes in trade liberalisation and the bilateral and multilateral agreements which support this. We have delivered trade liberalisation when in government. It was Labor governments who reduced Australia's trade tariff barriers unilaterally in the 1980s and 1990s. It's been Labor that's opened the way for the modernisation of Australian industry and improvements in living standards for working people. It's Labor who's presided over the formation of the Cairns Group, an initiative that secured significant freeing up of world markets, delivering benefits for Australian farmers in particular. It was Labor that secured the WTO Uruguay Round Agreement, one of the most significant multilateral trade agreements of the modern era. It's Labor who's negotiated and implemented free trade agreements with Malaysia, Chile, the 10 ASEAN countries and New Zealand. And in opposition, in my time, we have supported the Korea-Australia Free Trade Agreement and the Japan-Australia Economic Partnership Agreement. Our support for free trade is not a matter of extreme ideology or unthinking orthodoxy. We do not see the signing ceremony as the end of the game. Our goal is to always ensure free trade, open markets and economic change works for all Australians, and I stress all Australians. Labor understands that open markets are an excellent way of achieving economic growth, and economic growth is the best way to create good jobs. But we want not just economic growth, we want quality growth, and we want the benefits fairly shared amongst all Australians. We want market access for Australian firms, and we want new jobs for Australian workers. Secondly, Labor fundamentally believes in an Australia engaged with our region. We are the party of APEC and of the Asian century. We know more trade with Asia is an essential part of building a high-skill, high-wage future for all Australians. So if Australia gets this agreement with China right, everyone can benefit. This is what Labor wants. We want our hard-working farmers to get their high-quality produce onto the Chinese market more easily. We want new opportunities for our growing services sector, and we want emerging industries like advanced manufacturing to get a boost too. But the fundamental point remains: we need to get the package right. And for Labor, this will always mean doing the right thing by Australian workers. There is nothing for Australia to gain by entering a race to the bottom with our neighbours on wages and conditions. There will always be other countries, Mr Prime Minister, that have more people willing to work longer for less money. Our goal should be to play on Australia's strong ground. Why is it that the government does not believe in a high-skilled workforce good at doing high-quality work? Why is it that these people opposite are always so determined against safe workplaces and fair wages? This is what Australian Labor has fought for, and this is at the heart of our specific, factual and legitimate claims. We are seeking Chapter Plus safeguards for Australian jobs and Australian workers, and all of the shouting and catcalling from the rabble opposite doesn't change the fact that this government has not paid sufficient attention to Australian jobs. We believe, and we call upon the government today, including this person currently the Prime Minister, to look at enabling legislation which includes, and I will be specific for the sake of the government, mandatory labour market testing for projects over $150 million, ensuring that Australians always get first opportunity before overseas workers are considered. We want an assurance in the legislation that Australian workplace skills and safety standards will be maintained, and we want an assurance that Australian wages will not be undercut. Mr Deputy Speaker, without these safeguards, the current agreement would allow employers to fly in temporary workers for infrastructure projects worth more than $150 million without having to first check whether Australian workers are available to do this job. I repeat this. It is a fact. It is a fact that this government are proposing the diminution of labour market testing for projects over $150 million. What has the Prime Minister got against Australian construction workers getting access? These investment facilitation agreements, these arrangements, these IFAs, mean a company could, for example, build a new hotel in the Sydney or Melbourne CBD and not have to advertise in the local paper or seek.com for Australian workers first. This is explicitly outlined in the Memorandum of Understanding attached to this agreement. There's a side letter to the deal also outlining the option of removing mandatory skills assessments for temporary guest workers in key trades, carpenters, machine and motor mechanics, joiners and electricians. Why don't you like Aussie carpenters and electricians over there?
Order on my right.
I know the impact of poor workplace safety on Australian workers. I have met too many victims of industrial injuries and their families to be a party to knowingly reducing the skills and safety standards on Australian work sites. This government and the side letter are not risks worth taking on behalf of the Australian people. These are Labor's core concerns the Prime Minister wanted me to articulate, and I'll say them again for his benefit. Upholding Australian safety standards and conditions and protecting Australian jobs. I invite the Prime Minister and the government to drop the political stunts. Look at these people opposite. They must have been pumped this morning. They've gone fantastic. At last we're going to be on the front foot. We've got the mother of all wedges to give the opposition. That's all these people are good at, politics, never the policy. It is not too late, Prime Minister. It is not too late, Prime Minister, to sit down and talk with us. What do you have against negotiating with the opposition? You are the opposition leader in exile. You've never been so happy than when you were sitting here, I think. Now, you should sit down and talk about our serious, legitimate concerns. If you've got time to play games like this stunt, you've got more than enough time to negotiate with the opposition. Why do you think you are the 100% know-all of Australian Labor standards? We are not, and let me be clear. Mr Abbott, we're not asking you to go back to Beijing. We will come to your office if that helps. Labor's position is crystal clear, and I repeat it again. Mandatory labour market testing for projects over $150 million, an assurance that Australian skills and safety will be maintained and that Australian wages will not be undercut. Over the last decade, politicians from both sides of politics have worked hard for this deal. The real problem with the China Free Trade Agreement is we've got a Prime Minister who would rather have a fight than a feed. But what I say to this Prime Minister and his followers, such as they are on the backbench, what I say to them is, do not confuse being stubborn with being strong. You're a good man at being stubborn, but you confuse it with strength. Put aside politics as usual, Mr Abbott. John Howard was capable of doing it on the US Free Trade Agreement, but you are no John Howard, are you? You are no John Howard. It is time for you to put aside the persona of the brawler. All I say, Mr Abbott, is put Australian jobs first in the agreement. Your resolution unamended changes nothing, helps no one, goes nowhere. Grow up, Mr Abbott, and do your day job.
Order.